I've been in the technology space now for a long time and I really like it, but there is a definite dark side. So today I'm going to take you inside the dark underworld of consulting. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And I've been in the consulting space now for about 25 years. Started my career at one of the big four consulting firms, got very frustrated with some of the politics and the biases and the misdirection that they participated in. And since then, I've started an independent tech-agnostic consulting company for that reason, because I didn't like the way the traditional consulting model worked. And our model continues to evolve. We continue to expand our services and the value we bring to our clients. But a lot of the consulting industry still hasn't changed, and there is a dark underworld that I want to share with you here today. The first reason why there's such a dark side to consulting is the fact that there's so many conflicts of interest in this industry. The reason I created Third Stage Consulting to be tech agnostic and independent, completely unaffiliated with software vendors, is because I saw how it was creating conflicts of interest with customer bases. For example, when I was at Price Waterhouse, one of the first projects I was on was an ERP evaluation, and we evaluated software for a client that paid us close to $1.5 million in consulting fees to help assess their operations and figure out which technology would be the best fit for them. And when we got into the project, I quickly realized that we were going to recommend SAP no matter what. That was the predefined answer from day one of the project. And being a new consultant, I thought it seemed odd, it seemed weird, it seemed unethical. But it turns out that wasn't just how this project worked, it's how other projects that I was involved with then forward seemed to work as well. So in other words, clients were paying us money to make a decision or a recommendation that would act in our own self-interest because we had a big SAP practice affiliated with our Denver office where I was based. So our job was to feed as much business over to the SAP practice as possible. So as you can imagine, we recommended SAP just about every time, if not every time I was involved in a software selection at that company. And this conflict of interest is not limited to PwC. It's not limited to the big four consulting firms. In fact, it's not even limited to software selection. It's also rampant in implementations as well. When consulting firms are partnering with a software vendor and they're making commission and a cut of subscription revenue over time, their job and their economic incentive is to get you to consume as much technology as possible and to increase your cost structure as much as possible long term. I know for some consulting firms, they make more from recurring software subscription commissions from the software vendors than they do from the actual services side of things. So right there's a conflict of interest too. They do want to provide services to you. They want you to keep them in as their service provider, but the real money, the real profit, the high margin stuff where they're making a majority of their profit is coming from that recurring revenue from cloud-based subscriptions that they were able to sell you and convince you to not only buy, but to deploy throughout your organization. So conflicts of interest is a big problem. And in my opinion, the whole reason you hire a consultant is to get objectivity, to get someone who can look at your business and represent you, not the vendor. So the fact that companies in many cases are making more money from software vendors than they are from you, the client, that is an absolute conflict of interest. And you have to ask yourself, why would I hire and pay for these sorts of expensive services when I'm getting a conflict of interest and then I'm getting a very biased response? And that's why I ultimately decided to start Third Stage Consulting. Now, I spoke about how there's a conflict of interest in consulting. In addition to this conflict of interest between what software vendors are paying consulting firms versus what clients are paying consulting firms, there's also misaligned goals. Once you've hired the consulting firm, they have an immediate economic incentive that is misaligned with yours. This is why so many organizations struggle with managing their implementation firms, especially if you're deploying a big consulting firm, a big four consulting firm, or one of the big massive global system integrators. Their job is to put as many bodies as possible on your project. And their job, by the way, is also to compress the timeline, unreasonably so in most cases, to where they can accelerate their own revenue. Now, it might be that you're going to take a certain amount of time to implement technology because that's just how fast you're able to move as an organization, but they're always going to push you to try and compress that pretty dramatically. And there's a fine line between being aggressive and pushing you and challenging you to go faster. But most of the time we find that these big system integrators are completely unrealistic in the way they compress the timelines. So what happens is they compress the timeline, they front load the revenue that they generate, and then they benefit when you run over time and budget. When it turns out you were never going to implement it in that compressed time frame, which usually you can see up front if you've worked in these projects before, they continue to let those projects ride, those revenue run rates continue, and the only person that benefits from your struggles is the consulting firm. And that right there is a misaligned goal. The fact that they benefit when you suffer is a problem. And again, there's a fine line between paying for services and getting value out of it, but when you're overpaying because they couldn't do their jobs right in terms of developing a realistic plan, you shouldn't be the one that suffers, and they definitely should not be the ones to benefit. But that's the broken part of the consulting model that we see here today, and that is a dark side of the world of consulting. One of the things I absolutely hated about working in the Big Four consulting environment is the level of politicking that happened. There was so much time we spent politicking, whether it was how we're going to get ahead of whether it was how we're going to outperform one another, how we're going to meet our utilization goals, how we're going to get on that partner track, how we're going to game the system to where the client will hire more of our people, how we could game the system to keep other consulting firms out of the picture. We spent an absolutely ridiculous amount of time in my career at the Big Four consulting firms spending time just politicking. And the worst part of it all is we billed our clients for that time. So we'd be in a client conference room just with us consultants scheming on how to keep that one consulting firm out that might be a threat to us or might call us out on our BS. We would politic on that one person that wasn't a proponent of us being there. Maybe they were calling us out or calling us to the carpet in terms of our performance or value add. We would find ways to try and neutralize that person, and we would spend time scheming to figure out how to get that person out of the way so that politically we were secure in that environment. Now, of course, we had to sell our services, we had to prove our value, we had to build relationships. That's all normal stuff in any sort of B2B and sales environment. But the way some of these big consulting firms takes that to another level is beyond ridiculous. And that's why I think there's so little value to show for a lot of these Big Four consulting firms, because a big subset of what they're charging clients for is acting in the consulting firm's self-interest, not in the client's self-interest. So for example, if you have a quality assurance provider, a third-party quality assurance project manager type person that you want to hire to bring in to give a fresh perspective on the project, to make sure that the SIA or the big consulting firm is being held accountable, you should view that as a good thing. That's a good thing for your client. It's going to make your client feel better. And if you're doing your job right, you've got nothing to worry about. If you're adding value, you shouldn't be worried about or threatened by another third party. But the problem is, because they did so many other shady things that they didn't want the client to call them out on, you would find a way to keep that person out of the picture because you knew you were going to get called out. And again, by the way, you're billing for that time. The client is paying you to figure out how to keep that consultant out that was going to benefit that client potentially. So the level of politics that you see within Big Four consulting firms is a definite dark side, whether you're an internal consultant and especially if you're a customer of these big consulting firms. Another dark side of consulting is that so many consultants wear their blinders. They have an area of expertise that they can't really think outside of. And this is understandable on one hand because you need people that have deep expertise in one area. The problem is that when you're going through a digital transformation or any sort of big business change initiative, you can't have a bunch of people that are only operating in a silo with their blinders on, a very myopic view of the world. You need people that can look at the entire picture, end to end, your overall strategy, your business, your technology, your culture, your organization, your architecture, all that stuff. You need people that can tie that all together. And when everyone's operating in silos in their own myopic view of the world, it creates a disconnect in the way the project is rolled out. In addition, this industry has a horrid track record of failure. So digital transformations still fail at 80% or more, and guess what? 25 years ago, it was 80% or more. So nothing has changed, and yet you keep recycling these same consultants through the system. They're doing the same things they were doing 25 years ago, leading to failure, and then people start to wonder, why are we still failing in our projects? Well, it's because we've got our myopic view of the world, our blinders on, our tech-first approach to projects, our myopic view of we just need to sell software, we need to slam technology down the client's throat. That approach didn't work 25 years ago, and it's still not working today. Now, another dark side of consulting that I've actually seen more in the last 5 to 10 years is that anyone can be a consultant. Everyone listening here today, it's easy enough to become a consultant. You can hang up a shingle, get a domain website up and running, register your name with whatever regulatory body you need to, and within days you can have an official consulting firm set up, you can market yourself as an expert, and you're up and running. Doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but there are a lot of people out there that decide they want to become consultants even if they're not qualified. There's no sort of certification or training or qualification process that needs to happen to be a good consultant, but yet anyone can do it. I've had people through my career that work for our company, even outside of consulting, like in marketing, for example. They do marketing for a couple years and decide, hey, I'm a consultant now. When they've never consulted in their lives, they just did marketing, but yet they hang up a shingle and say, hey, I've got a consulting firm now. And that's true all over the world. You see people all over that have some limited success or some limited experience, and they decide they want to go help other organizations. Now, a lot of times it's coming from a good place. People genuinely do oftentimes want to help customers and their clients, but oftentimes they don't have the right experience, or they've been brought up with bad habits in the consulting space to where they're replicating some of those bad habits again, but they're doing it without the broad team or the broad qualifications or certifications that might be required in other fields. So anyone can be a consultant, doesn't mean they're all good, but there has been a big fragmentation of the consulting space in the last 5 to 10 years where you have a lot of 1 and 2 man shops that are setting up shop, and they're not all necessarily qualified. So you just want to make sure that the consulting firm you hire or go work for is someone that's credible, that has real experience, real world experience, and knows what they're talking about. So I hope this has provided some interesting perspective for you, whether you're a buyer of consulting services or whether you're a consultant yourself. And whether you're a buyer or a consultant, I'd love to hear your feedback. What are your thoughts on consulting? What are your thoughts on consultants in general? I'd love to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. I've heard it all. You're not going to hurt my feelings. So if you've got negative things to say about the industry, I'd love to hear it. If you've got positive things or positive experiences you'd like to share, I'd love to hear that too. So leave that in the comments below, and hopefully we can discuss some of that in an upcoming video. So I hope you found this information useful, and hope you have a great day. Like, I could poke around the corner too if you want it to be super dramatic or weird or funny. I don't know. Watch this. How the tables have turned. Oh.